All right, let's dive right into this explainer, because we are exploring a truly fascinating shift in perspective today. If you're an ambitious person, you've probably spent a ton of time obsessing over perfect timing, trying to find that exact right moment or that magical silver bullet to achieve your goals. But today, we're throwing that completely out the window. We are moving away from the whole myth of luck and perfect timing and replacing it with the absolute cold, hard mathematical guarantee of massive volume. Because the truth is, when you do enough reps, volume negates luck entirely.
We all know that feeling of intense frustration when things are unpredictable. You try something, it doesn't work, and immediately you're thinking the universe is just conspiring against you. But honestly, ask yourself, is it actually bad luck, or are you just not doing enough? What if that wild volatility we experience, swinging from an amazing day to an absolutely terrible month, isn't bad luck at all? The data actually shows that volatility is almost always just a symptom of doing way too little. We basically mistake a tiny sample size for our permanent reality.
And Simon Sinek has this brilliant way of pointing out the psychological paradox we all fall into here. He points out that we simply cannot mix our logics. You can't claim that all your victories are because you're some hardworking genius, but then turn around and say your failures are just bad luck or, the economy's fault. You have to pick a lane. We really have to choose to take total responsibility for our outputs instead of blaming external circumstances. Basically, you have to own the math.
So, let's look at the actual math of volume. Because replacing the myth of luck with cold, hard math completely changes the game. Let's see what volume really looks like in practice. Consider this real-world story from entrepreneur Alex Hormozi. Early in his career, he wanted to test out an advertising campaign. So he put out 300 flyers, waited for the phone to ring, and crickets. Nothing. He went to a veteran in his industry to complain that the strategy was totally broken. Well, the pro asked him what his test size was, and when Hormozi said 300, the guy just laughed. The pro's testing baseline wasn't 300 flyers in a day, it was 5,000 flyers every single day for 30 days. That's 150,000 flyers compared to 300. It's wild, but it proves that what feels like terrifying volatility and failure to an amateur is just super clear, predictable data to a pro who's actually playing the volume game.
Once you start to wrap your head around volume, how do you actually direct it? You essentially have three choices: do more of what works, make what works slightly better, or try something entirely new. Now, amateurs almost always run to number 3. They get terrible shiny object syndrome. But if you have a winning strategy, the absolute highest risk-adjusted move is number 1. You just need to do a massively higher volume of the mundane thing that already works. Think of it like a really tall tower of perfectly stacked blocks. Pulling one out from the bottom to try something new is highly likely to just topple the whole thing over. Instead, you just keep placing those same winning blocks on top over and over again.
And why is overwhelming volume so necessary? Well, the magic number here is 37. Disney conducted this massive study and found out it actually takes 37 magic moments to undo just one tragic moment. Because, as human beings, we have a severe negativity bias. Negative word of mouth and bad experiences compound way faster than positive ones. Negative volume works faster than positive volume, so your positive inputs need to be relentlessly, overwhelmingly massive just to survive and keep the scale tipped in your favor.
Which brings us to the math of asymmetric risk. Because if the math of volume is so undeniable, and doing 1,000 times more of what works is so obvious, why isn't everyone doing it?
Well, people avoid volume because they totally catastrophize the downside. But the reality of an asymmetric bet is so much different than we think. Imagine you take a shot at something new, right? Say, starting a business or launching a project. You might think, okay, there's a 50% chance this goes to 0 and a 50% chance it grows 10x. But here's the secret. When you start with nothing, your risk is inherently asymmetric. The worst-case scenario, the quote-unquote 0, is literally just your current baseline. You just go right back to exactly where you are sitting right now. The downside is incredibly limited, but the upside is completely uncapped, making the shot pretty much always worth taking.
And because that upside is uncapped, to succeed you literally only have to be right one time out of thousands of attempts. Take the guy who wrote Jingle Bells. Historically, the man failed at almost everything his entire life. He had a tragic run of bad luck and failed businesses, but he just kept taking shots and he happened to write Jingle Bells. That one single massive win out of a lifetime of volume secured him a permanent legacy. That is how volume completely negates a lifetime of bad luck.
But of course, there is surviving the suck. Knowing the math is one thing, but taking thousands of shots means enduring massive amounts of boredom, rejection, and failure, which means we have to manage the emotional tax of volume.
To survive this game, you need a seriously resilient mindset.
You need tools to bounce back from bad things happening as fast as humanly possible. So let's look at 3 specific mental reframes: cosmic irrelevance, the frame of the veteran, and play it out. These are game changers for shortening the time it takes to recover from a hit. First up is cosmic irrelevance. And I know, as absurdly humorous and morbid as it sounds, remembering that we are all eventually just lunch for worms is highly effective. Think about the Queen of England for a second. She ruled a nation for decades, yet most of us haven't even thought about her all week. When you die, people will literally be arguing over the quality of the appetizers at your funeral before heading out to dinner and moving on with their lives. Remembering this cosmic regression to the mean just instantly lowers the stakes of whatever tiny failure you experience today. In the grand scheme, it just doesn't matter that much.
The second tool is the frame of the veteran. When a major inconvenience hits you, just pause and ask yourself, if this exact same inconvenience happened to me 1,000 times in a row, how would I feel on the 1,000th time? Honestly, you'd probably just shrug and accept it as a totally normal part of the process. Well, if you can feel that way on the 1,000th time, you can choose to feel that way on the first time. The circumstance is exactly the same. The emotional reaction is just a choice.
The third tool is simply to play it out. Fear absolutely thrives in the vague. We get this vague sense of dread that if we fail, we'll be completely ostracized and perish. But if you literally play out the worst-case scenario step by step, it totally loses its power. Say you lose all your money. Okay, what happens next? Well, you sleep on a friend's couch. If you can't do that, you go to a shelter. You realize the absolute rock bottom is just having basic food, a roof, and still breathing air. When you get incredibly specific about the downside, that vague, paralyzing fear just evaporates. And this all brings us to a massive core emotional goal. To sustain high volume, you have to break the dependency between your external circumstances and your internal mood. If you need constant positive feedback and absolutely perfect conditions to be happy, the sheer volume of failure required for success is just going to crush you. You must effectively choose to win the day and stay in a good mood regardless of the immediate feedback the world happens to be giving you right now.
Let's pull this all together with compounding and the conclusion. Because when you combine that emotional resilience with sustained high volume, you unlock pretty much the ultimate force in the universe.
It's like Stephen Bartlett points out, the small decisions we make every single day compound invisibly. Early on, the returns are tiny. Consistency never looks impressive in the short term. Nobody is cheering for you when you don't eat junk food for one day, or when you make 10 extra cold calls on a random Tuesday. But, as Warren Buffett always notes, compounding is the 8th wonder of the world. It works slowly, and then it works incredibly fast, yielding an explosive, massive visible return that leaves everyone else standing around wondering how you got so lucky.
So here is the ultimate takeaway. The pessimists, the critics, the doubters, they get to be statistically right 9 times out of 10. They'll tell you an idea won't work, and yeah, most of the time, it won't. But the optimists get to be rich. Why? Because your sheer intensity and relentless volume mean that your one massive compounding win will completely negate all of your losses combined. The critics win on the frequency of being right, but you win on the sheer magnitude of the outcome.
Since the math explicitly proves that volume negates luck, the only thing left to ask yourself is this. Stephen Bartlett describes waking up every day with 24 chips to place on the roulette board of life. You have nothing to lose, and you have absolutely unlimited shots on goal as long as you're breathing. So how many bets are you willing to make with the time you have left? Don't sit around holding out for perfect luck. Just increase your volume, spin the wheel again, and let the math do the heavy lifting. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I will see you on the next one.